looking at our instructions for the composition of two functions, we are going to take two functions and add them together. So I've got this function plus this function. So the first function is going to be negative 3x squared plus x. The second function is going to be 5. And what I'm supposed to do with those two things is add them together. So I've got a negative 3x squared plus x. And then I have a 5. What am I supposed to do to those two things? I'm supposed to add. So when I combine like terms, I don't have any like terms, so my final answer is a negative 3x squared plus x plus 5. And then I need to find the domain. So the domain of this is going to be, I'm in function world. Your domain is all real numbers unless you see variables and denominators, or you see variables under even roots, which I don't. So my domain is all real numbers. Okay, the next one says grab your two functions and subtract. So the first function is a negative 3x squared plus x. The second function is 5. And what am I supposed to do to that? I'm supposed to subtract. So I'm going to take these two functions and I'm going to subtract them. So looking at that, it's just that this is now going to become a minus 5 instead of the plus 5 that it was. So my answer will be a negative 3x squared plus x minus 5. And again, your domain, because you have no variables and denominators and no even roots, your domain is going to be all real numbers. Hang on, I'm trying to organize for you. So this is, now I'm supposed to multiply. So given two functions, I'm supposed to multiply these two functions together. So the first function is a negative 3x squared plus x. The second function is a 5, and we are supposed to multiply these two functions together, which means I need to take that 5 and distribute him to the contents of whatever f is. So I'm going to take 5 times this term, 5 times that term. So 5 times a negative 3x squared is a negative 15x squared. 5 times x is 5x. And again, your domain is going to be all real numbers. And then finally what we have is my two functions being divided. So when I divide my two functions, I've got a negative 3x squared plus x. I have that over 5. And what am I supposed to do to those two things? I'm supposed to divide. So looking at that, there's nothing that I can reduce. There's no like terms. There's no common terms that I can reduce at all. So this is my answer. My answer is a negative 3x squared plus x over 5. What is your domain? My domain is all real numbers. Unless I see variables in denominators. I have a denominator, but there's no variables in it. So my domain is all real numbers. We notice now that we are doing composition functions, when we look back here, we added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided. And we got our answers. Well, now we're going to do what's called a composition of functions. So we're going to nest one function inside of the other. So looking at this one, I notice f first, so he's in charge. So I'm going to write f, but instead of writing x's, I'm going to write parentheses. So this would have been an x squared minus 4. And so f is in charge, and I'm going to put g of x on the inside wherever there was an x. So where my parentheses are, I'm going to put g of x in. So that is going to now become x minus 2 squared. And then I want to see what happens. Is there anything magical that happens when I reduce this? So remember, a square root squared is going to pop out. So I now have the square, or sorry, no I don't. I have x minus 2 minus 4, which gives me a final answer of x minus 6, because a square root squared means the argument pops out. And then what's my domain? My domain is all real numbers. There are no variables in denominators, no variables under even roots. This is another way to write composition functions. So this notation will differ depending on what textbook you're using. And so I'm going to look and see who's in charge. On this one, F was in charge. That's what was written first. On this one, G is in charge, and I'm going to put f of x inside of G. So I'm going to look at G first. Wherever there is an x, I'm going to put parentheses. So I've got the square root of x minus 2. And then I'm going to put whatever f is inside of where those parentheses are. So I've got x squared minus 4. And now let's see if we can combine like terms or anything like that. There's no really purpose of the parentheses other than to show you where the square root of x minus 2 went, or where G went. I just said that backwards. So that's going to be a great question. Okay, there's no purpose of the parentheses other than to show you where f goes, because f is written second, so f gets nested inside of G. So I can drop my parentheses, so that leaves me with an x squared minus 4 minus 2. But good heavens, which leaves me with an x squared minus 6. You cannot pull that x squared out, because this is an addition-subtraction problem. Okay, if this was multiplication, then you could, but it's not. So then I would like to know what my domain is. My domain has an even root. Okay, my domain has an even root. So I need to look at the domain of this, and I need to say whatever my domain is needs to be greater than or equal to 0. And now I'm going to solve. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. And then I'm going to square root both sides. And I'm not going to forget my plus minus. So x needs to be greater than or equal to positive or negative square root of 6. So what does that look like as far as what I'm going to do? You're actually going to flip-flop your signs. Whatever this is needs to be 6 or bigger. Okay, it needs to be 6 or bigger. So what that means is I actually have x is going to be, I just drew a number line. Okay, so I've got a negative root 6. I've got a positive root 6. I can use everything over here. And I can use everything over here. Okay, so when I did this division, or when I squared both sides, I actually morphed this into using two things. And if you don't know what to do, what you can do is grab a point. So what's a great point to the left of negative 6? Let's grab 5. Okay, so can this work? What is 5 squared? It's 25. 25 minus 6 is 19, which is positive. It's fine. So grab a point over here. Let's grab 10. 10 squared minus 6 is 100 minus 6, which is 94, which is positive. So we're good. So anything in here is not going to work. So what's a nice friendly number inside of here? Let's try 0. 0 squared is 0, minus 6 is negative 6. You just generated a negative. So everything between these two is off limits. Everything going this direction is what I want to use. So my domain is now going to be from negative infinity to negative root 6, union root 6 to positive infinity. So everything from negative infinity to here, and then everything from positive infinity to here. So when we introduced this negative, that was going to affect what was happening with this inequality.